Hey guys, tonight we step into a world of mud-slicked boots, roaring artillery, and a surprisingly elegant gramophone balanced on your lap. Picture this. You're crouched in a makeshift trench, the cold soaking through your uniform, rats scurrying across your feet like they pay rent, and in the middle of all that mess, you're gently winding the crank of a gleaming brass-horned machine. Music crackles to life, a waltz maybe, or a scratchy jazz tune, drifting over the stench of war like perfume over garbage. Yeah, you probably won't survive this. But somehow, bringing this absurdly delicate music box into the nightmare of the Western Front makes everything just a little less horrifying. You didn't pack it for laughs. You packed it to remember what the world once sounded like, before the world lost its mind. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, drop your location and the local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the sludge with your gear biting into your back, your boots suctioned into the wet dirt every time you try to take a step. Welcome to the front lines. Your uniform itches, your breath clouds in front of your face, and the soundscape around you is a gruesome symphony of rifle pops, shouted orders, and the low, distant growl of big guns preparing to ruin someone's morning. And tucked under your arm, absurdly enough, is a polished wooden box with a turntable inside. Somewhere between suicidal optimism and inspired defiance, you brought a gramophone to war. It's 1915. You're Private Durant, or at least that's what they call you now. Once upon a time you were just George, a young clerk in Brighton with a decent ear for jazz and an embarrassing fondness for sentimental ballads. When the war broke out, you didn't think twice. You signed up like everyone else, expecting, like so many others, to be home by Christmas. Now, it's March, and Christmas is a distant rumor, just like hot baths and a full night's sleep. When your mates see the gramophone, they freeze. There's a moment, just a blink, of silent awe. Then the laughter starts. You bring your nanny's tea set too, Georgie? Someone calls out. Oi, play us a tune before the Huns blow our eardrums out. Another chimes in. You set the box carefully on an ammo crate, lift the lid, and reveal the brass horn, the hand crank, the tiny spindle. It's not fancy. It's secondhand, scratched, and a bit temperamental, but it works. You carry a handful of records in your rucksack, each one sleeved in thick brown paper. There's one by Paul Whiteman, one cheeky bit of early vaudeville comedy, and a dusty old Chopin piece that makes you feel oddly like crying. No one expects it to sound good, but when the needle hits the groove and the horn crackles to life, the entire trench falls still. Sound has power here. You realize it almost immediately. The gramophone doesn't drown out the war. It dares to coexist with it. Even the cynical lads from Glasgow stop griping for 5 minutes just to listen. One bloke, Freddie, wiry and mean-looking, starts tapping his fingers against his rifle stock, almost embarrassed. "'S like being back in the pub," he mutters. Someone else hums along, off-key but sincere. The tune ends and there's a beat of silence. Then a smattering of applause, genuine and a bit stunned. You get a new nickname that night, His Majesty's DJ. It's better than the last one, Mum's Boy. So you take it. Historians still argue whether these kinds of moments, music in the trenches, were as common as the stories suggest. Some say they're overblown, the product of nostalgia and embellished letters home. But others argue that music was one of the few comforts soldiers had, and gramophones, while rare, were treasured like relics. That night, as you lie on your back with your helmet under your head and the record sleeves pressed against your ribs for warmth, you realize what you've done. You haven't just brought music. You've brought memory. The old world, the one before all this mud and madness, lives in those grooves. The next morning, your sergeant pulls you aside. "You know, Durant, that contraption gets blown up. I'm not writing it in the casualty report." Fair enough. By the end of the week, word spreads. Other squads wander over by accident during downtime. You find yourself curating impromptu concerts, doing your best to keep the crank turning even as shells whistle overhead. And every time the stylus drops, A little island of calm forms in the chaos. Oh, and here's a weird one. Someone swears the music keeps rats away. No one believes him, of course. But the next night, one soldier insists on putting the Chopin record on loop to ward off the whiskered devils. He's completely serious. Spoiler, it does not work. Your gramophone, once a silly indulgence, starts to feel like a small act of rebellion. Against the cold. Against despair. Against the idea that you're just meat in a uniform. One officer, Lieutenant Marsh, posh as tea and toast, tells you it's an improper distraction. But even he can't help nodding along when the jazz starts. The hypocrisy's thick enough to butter bread with. As weeks turn into months, you realize something else. The music gives people permission. Permission to remember love. Home. Better times. One kid confesses he hadn't thought of his mom's singing voice in a year, until you played that record. Another says it reminded him of the local dance hall where he met his girl. You're not curing trench foot or dodging bullets with it, but in your own strange way, you're keeping the war from swallowing everyone whole. And when the gramophone finally skips, just once, because of a tremor in the ground from a not-so-distant shell, the collective flinch from your mates tells you, this isn't just music anymore. It's armor. The moment you arrive at the front, you're met with equal parts curiosity and ridicule. Not because of your accent or the way you tie your boots, but because of what you brought in place of extra socks or, useful supplies. There you are, grinning like a madman, hauling your battered gramophone like it's the crown jewels. You're assigned a bunk, if you can call a stretch of muddy earth and a torn ground sheet a bunk, and you kneel to unpack. First out of the bag, one folded photo of your mum. Second, a tin of jam. Third, the gleaming brass horn of a gramophone. Everyone stops what they're doing. Is that a trumpet? Asks Wilkes, the boy-faced Londoner with more freckles than fear. No, it's a phonograph, innit? Says someone else. You try to explain. Gramophone. Plays records. I've got a few jazz waltzes, some classical. Keeps the mind sharp. Silence. Then laughter erupts like a grenade in the latrine. It's not cruel laughter, not really. More like disbelief wrapped in exhaustion. These are men who have seen lice crawl out of their breakfast, who've used sandbags as pillows and body heat as a heater. And here you are, dragging in what looks like an upper-class heirloom from some music hall. Did you forget your monocle, too? Someone calls. Still, when you set the thing on its crate and lovingly lift the lid, a few of them gather round. Not out of respect, but out of morbid curiosity, like watching someone try to juggle eggs during a hurricane. Go on then, Freddie mutters, arms crossed. Let's hear the Queen's favorite hymn. You wind the crank, slowly, deliberately. The machine creaks, clicks, and begins to spin. You set the stylus on a well-loved record. Paul Whiteman's band, jazzy, upbeat, a little scratchy from where. Sound emerges. It's faint at first, like a ghost whispering through a tin can. But it grows. Warm, brassy, impossibly cheerful. Someone starts tapping a foot. Another hums along without realizing. And you sit back, arms resting on your knees, watching them forget, just for a second, where they are. It's not long before your gramophone becomes trench famous. Soldiers from other units drop by, pretending to inspect the dugouts while secretly hoping for a tune. Some offer to trade. Tinned beef for a night of jazz, cigarettes for 5 minutes of opera. One even tries to offer his extra pair of dry socks for just one record of ragtime. Of course, not everyone's thrilled. Durant, you do realize this isn't the Savoy Ballroom? Your corporal growls one morning. He's not a fan of distractions. Or music. Or joy, really. You suspect he was born frowning. Yes, corporal. You say, saluting with all the fake solemnity you can muster. Just keeping spirits up, sir. Keep 'em up with a shovel, not a symphony. He walks off, muttering something about bloody amateurs. You're fairly sure he hums a bit of the waltz later that night when he thinks no one's listening. Historians still argue whether individual soldiers were even allowed such personal items. Officially, space and weight were supposed to be reserved for essentials. But the truth is, soldiers were always sneaking in things that made life feel even 5% more human. One bloke brought a pet monkey, another a flute carved from bone. You? A gramophone. By the second week, your setup gets fancier. Someone donates a table. A bit of canvas is strung up as a rain cover. You find an old tea tin and fashion it into a makeshift amplifier. It doesn't work, but it looks very scientific, and that's half the battle. You begin building a playlist based on requests. "Something to make me forget this soup," says Jenkins, face still blotched with shell shock. You play a comic song about a man with an oversized mustache, and Jenkins laughs so hard he actually chokes on his tea. First time anyone's seen him laugh in days. "Got anything sad?" someone asks. You do, and you play it, and no one talks for 10 minutes afterward. The records become more than entertainment. They become emotional currency. Soldiers confess things to you they won't tell their mates. A Welshman named Idris swears the song Roses of Picardy makes him dream about his wife's wedding veil. One Canadian sniper tells you the music helps him aim. You decide not to question that one too much. And then there's the odd stuff. One soldier starts naming the records like pets. "Put on Harold," he says, referring to a particular foxtrot. Another insists that the jazz tunes bring good luck, citing a stretch of 3 whole days without incoming fire as proof. The weirdest moment, though, is when you wake up to find someone sleeping curled up next to the gramophone like it's a beloved dog. You don't even wake him, just crank up a lullaby and let him sleep. But it's not all dreamy trench concerts. You have to be strategic. Music attracts attention, some of it the loud German artillery kind. You learn to listen for the distant whistle of a shell and snatch the horn off mid-song, ducking like a guilty teenager caught by mum. Once, during a burst of machine gun fire, the needle skips and lands halfway through a song. The way it squeals over the groove is somehow worse than the bullets. Still, you keep going, because it's more than a machine now. It's a ritual, something constant in a place where nothing stays dry or alive for long. You don't write home about it. Your letters are full of the usual all's well and missing your puddings. But you imagine your sister laughing when she opens the empty record sleeves you mailed with little notes like, "This one survived a trench rat attack," or "Played during bombardment, still intact." You're becoming famous for it. Well, trench famous. Which, to be clear, means maybe 24 people know you as that nutter with the music box. But it matters. In a world gone sideways, your gramophone is upright, spinning, singing, still here. There's a strange rhythm to war, a pulse of violence and silence. You learn to live in the gaps. You eat in them, write letters in them, try to sleep in them. And now, thanks to you, you dance in them, or at least sway awkwardly in wet boots. Because every lull in the fighting becomes a moment to crank the gramophone. You've even got a schedule now. Breakfast jazz. Noon opera if no one's throwing grenades. Evenings? That's when you break out the sentimental stuff. Slow ballads, old music hall numbers, and one particularly weepy instrumental that gets everyone real quiet, real fast. Someone tried to make a joke about that once and got pelted with a spoon. One night, just after dusk, you're posted in a new section of the trench. A long, curved thing known unofficially as the worm. It smells worse than most, and that's saying something. But the company's decent. You've got Jenkins, Idris, Wilkes, and a Scottish fellow named Boyd who insists bagpipes are the only legitimate instrument and that your entire collection is colonial racket. He still shows up every night, though, and hums along like everyone else. That night, you choose a ragtime number. Something upbeat. It echoes strangely down the trench, bouncing off corrugated metal and wooden supports. The song skips once. Probably a bit of damp got into the grooves, but no one complains. A rat scuttles past. Wilkes throws a boot. Misses. Standard. And then, out of nowhere, the music changes. You don't touch the crank. Don't move the stylus. But it slows down. Not like it's broken. More like the air itself is leaning in, pressing the sound into molasses. The jazz becomes a dirge. The boys go still. Feels like the war's holding its breath, Idris mutters. In a weird way, it is. You get used to sensing incoming fire. The distant cough of a howitzer. The unnatural hush just before something big lands nearby. The gramophone seems to catch it too, stuttering like it knows something's coming. and then boom, a shell slams down 50 yards away, close enough to throw dirt in your tea. The record screeches off its groove and the horn topples sideways. Everyone ducks. Someone curses. You shove the gramophone under a plank, heart pounding. No one's hit. Not this time. But just like that, the music is gone. 10 minutes later, you're cranking again. Slower this time. Something soft. A violin piece with long, weeping notes that stretch into the dark like fingertips. The lads sit quietly. No one talks. Boyd's humming again. Here's the thing, it's not just music anymore. It's ceremony. A way to mark time. Not in hours or days, but in emotional chapters. Remember when we played this after Jenkins fell into the latrine? This one got us through the 5-hour watch in the rain. Don't play that one again. Wilkes cried like a toddler. There's one tune, Stardust, that gets under everyone's skin. Something about its old-world smoothness makes the trench feel even more broken by comparison. You're not even sure how it got into your collection. Maybe your sister snuck it in. But now it's sacred. You save it for special occasions, like when someone's promoted, or when they're not coming back. You learn to watch people during playback. Some smile. Some close their eyes and sway, imagining ballroom lights or home kitchens or girls in long skirts they never got the name of. Others stare at the dirt and say nothing. There's this moment, maybe your favorite, when the record ends and no one moves. It's not silence, exactly. The war never really stops. But in that breath after the last note, it's like everyone agrees not to ruin it just yet. Like the music left behind a little echo of peace, and no one wants to be the first to shatter it. And then, someone breaks wind, or a rat squeals, or Boyd says something sarcastic, and the spell lifts. Historians still argue whether trench music had any tangible impact on morale. Some say it was nothing more than a distraction. Others believe it was vital, a psychological buoy in a sea of despair. You don't care what the experts say. You see it in their faces. It matters. You get creative. One night, you try syncing your winding with the rhythm of incoming artillery. You turn it into a game. Jazz crescendo meets boom. Brass solo versus machine gun rattle. It's like musical dueling. Dangerous? Sure. But the boys eat it up. Your gramophone starts showing its age. The crank squeaks. The turntable wobbles. You name it Gertrude in a moment of whimsy. Now everyone refers to it like a person. Don't drop Gertrude. Has anyone seen Gertrude's needle? I swear she played better yesterday. It's ridiculous. But it's also a coping mechanism. Like calling the trench the Ritz, or naming the latrine Buckingham Throne. If you can laugh at it, you can survive it. Sort of. One day, a chaplain passes through. He hears the music and stops dead. You expect him to scold you for secular noise during wartime. But instead, he sits, cross-legged, eyes closed. Afterward, he says softly, "For 5 minutes, I forgot there was mud in my boots." You hand him a spare record. He takes it like it's made of gold. And then there's the night with the gas drill. Everyone's fumbling with masks, coughing, bumping into each other like a scene from a tragicomedy. You, being you, decide it's the perfect moment to start winding up Gertrude. She's barely audible under the chaos, but once everyone's masked and ready, the tune rises. Beethoven's Fifth. It is, without exaggeration, completely ridiculous. A bunch of rubber-faced soldiers standing like ducklings, heads too large and breathing like Darth Vader, all while the most dramatic piece of music ever composed bellows out of a tin horn. You swear even the gas canisters hesitate before rolling in. That night, everyone's wheezing and exhausted, but in better spirits. You don't get thanked, not out loud, but there's an extra biscuit in your tin. And someone, probably Wilkes, patches the crack in Gertrude's lid with waxed cloth. Like a gift. Your gramophone might be the only thing on the front line that's both beautiful and absolutely unnecessary. And that's why it matters. By now, cranking the gramophone has become second nature. Like cleaning your rifle or dodging trench rats. You can wind it blindfolded. You can swap a record with one hand while stirring powdered tea with the other. You've even developed a knack for coaxing Gertrude into life during less than ideal conditions, like sleet, shell fire, or a spontaneous brawl over who gets the driest corner of the dugout. But today's test is a new one, gas drill. It begins with a shrill whistle and that dreaded shout, "Gas! Gas! Gas!" which shoots straight into your spine. Training kicks in. You grab your mask, shove it over your face, and try not to think about how useless the rubbery thing feels when your hands are shaking like leaves. Around you, men scramble, tripping over boots, fumbling with straps, swearing creatively into muffled filters. And what do? You crank Gertrude, not for a laugh, not even for morale, just because you have to. Your hands need something familiar, something stupid and normal. Crank. Set the needle. Crank again. The record spins to life. A wobbly rendition of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. The opening notes loud and ominous. You've heard this one 100 times, but now it sounds, well, dramatic. The tension, the rising chords, it fits. It makes the drill feel almost like a performance. Soldiers in gas masks, staggered in formation, moving with robotic stiffness while classical music plays in the background. Someone chuckles through their filter. The sound is like a duck gargling soap. Even the sergeant, who usually has the emotional range of a brick wall, mutters, "Bloody hell, Durant. Couldn't pick something cheerier?" But he doesn't stop you. When the all-clear comes and the masks come off, there's coughing, groaning, and the inevitable comparing of who passed out the fastest. But beneath all that, there's a kind of odd calm, like the music carved out a pocket of mental safety, even as your lungs rebelled and your nerves frayed. From that day on, Gertrude becomes part of the drill. No one says it out loud, but every time the gas horn sounds, eyes flick toward you. You don't always oblige, but when you do, it's appreciated. Even if the only tune available is that bizarre French waltz your sister sent you without explanation. No one likes it, but now it's considered lucky. Historians still argue whether music during wartime drills was officially sanctioned or quietly tolerated. Some claim high command saw it as a distraction from discipline. Others suggest that, unofficially, they knew it helped, the way a lucky rabbit's foot or a scribbled prayer might. You're not sure what to believe, but when the record skips during a gas warning and 5 soldiers spontaneously hiss at you like offended cats, you figure it must be doing something right. Your reputation spreads. A trench 2 sectors over sends a runner, just a kid, maybe 16, who asks if the music bloke might lend a tune for their cook's birthday. You send him back with a ragtime record and strict instructions not to scratch it. He returns 3 days later, breathless, with a slightly warped record and a bar of chocolate courtesy of cook. Totally worth it, but not everything is smooth sailing. Enter Corporal Brenner, square jaw, mustache you could land a plane on, hates noise, mirth, and jazz in equal measure. You knew he'd come for Gertrude eventually. He catches you mid-serenade, something slow and syrupy by El Bowley, surrounded by half the trench, all swaying or quietly mouthing lyrics. Brenner strides in like a storm cloud in boots. "Private Durant," he barks. "Shut it off." You hesitate, not because you're trying to be brave, but because the chorus is just about to hit that sweet spot. He says it again, louder, "OFF, now." You stop cranking. The music slows, wobbles, dies. Brenner steps forward, eyes locked on the gramophone like it just insulted his mother. Improper use of field time. Unmilitary behavior. You want to play with toys. Durant? Do it at home. You say nothing. Everyone else scuttles away like rats sensing a kicked canteen's coming. He leans in. This, he gestures at Gertrude, isn't helping. It's soft. Makes men forget what they're here for. And that's when something unexpected happens. Boyd, the Scottish cynic, the man who once called jazz musical diarrhea, steps in. "Beggin' your pardon, Corp, but you're wrong," he says. "That machine's saved more heads than helmets. You want us sharp? Let us breathe." Brenner stares at him, then at you, then back at the silent, innocent gramophone. He doesn't confiscate it, but from then on, he avoids it like it's covered in lice, which is ironic considering everything else in the trench definitely is. And so Gertrude survives. You even manage to scrounge up a tin of oil to keep her crank smooth. Jenkins finds a bit of discarded wire and reinforces the tone arm. Wilkes paints a miniature Union Jack on the lid. She's officially a trench veteran now. One rainy night, you're stuck on watch duty, too tired to blink. The trench is a slush pit. Rain drums on your helmet. You don't dare crank the gramophone. Too exposed, too risky. So you hum instead. A quiet melody. Nothing special. But after a while, you hear it picked up by someone down the line. Then another. By midnight, the whole trench is whisper humming a tune no one quite remembers the words to. Just before dawn, a shell lands far too close. The shock makes you fall sideways, arms over your head. You wait for the worst, but the worst doesn't come. Gertrude, somehow, is still upright. Her lid's dented. Her crank is bent. But when you wind her later that morning, she still plays. It's a little slower now, a little scratchier, but the music is still there. Like you, the trench is unusually quiet this evening. There's always noise, of course. The distant drumming of artillery, the rustle of rats, the occasional muttered curse as someone finds out their socks are wetter than advertised. But tonight, the lads are waiting. Not for orders or chow or a letter from home. They're waiting for Edith Piaf. Started 2 nights ago. You just gotten a fresh bundle of records from home, carefully packed by your sister with cotton batting, the kind usually reserved for broken ornaments or biscuits, meant to survive a postman's wrestling match. Among the usual jazz, folk, and early crooners was one oddity. A smooth, emotional voice singing in French. You didn't know her name then. No one did. You put the needle down, not expecting much. And then silence. Everyone stopped. The song was soft but intense, full of longing, grief, and something else no one could quite put into words. A few soldiers tried translating the lyrics. Something about love, maybe loss, possibly bread. No one knew, but it didn't matter. They felt it, and, more astonishingly, so did Corporal Brenner. He had just passed by, ready to deliver his usual dose of joy-crushing commentary, when Piaf's voice floated out of Gertrude's horn like smoke. He paused. Not long, just 3 seconds, maybe 4, enough to glance at the record, at the swirling grooves, and say, "What's that?" You told him. He didn't reply, just stood there, still as a signpost, while the song wrapped around the trench like a wool blanket. When it ended, he grunted something vaguely approving and walked off. That was all it took. Now the lads want Piaf every night. They whisper her name like she's a ghost that lives inside Gertrude. "Play the French girl," someone says. "Edith." Another murmurs reverently, as if they knew her personally. You're not even sure how it became a ritual, but now it is. After dinner, usually some variety of gray stew, you set the gramophone on the ammo crate, brush off the horn, and wind it 3 times exactly. The record goes on. The trench hushes. Even Boyd, who once said music without bagpipes lacks a proper spine, leans in like a boy at a fireside story. You'd laugh if it weren't so strange. It's not just the voice. It's what it reminds people of. Not home, necessarily, but softness, complexity, the fact that, somewhere in the world, people are falling in love, dancing in parlors, maybe even having conversations that don't involve sandbags and rifles. The real surprise? Piaf's record gets passed around to other trenches, carefully like sacred text. One group trades it for a rare tin of apricot jam. Another tries to bribe you with a fresh pair of gloves. You lend it out on the condition that no one touches the grooves with bare fingers, and if they crack it, you will weep like a child and possibly curse their entire bloodline. One evening, you get bold. You play Edith Piaf during a morning cleanup, when the trench is half awake and Brenner is very much present. He stomps up the duckboards like a storm cloud in uniform, clearly mid-rant about some improperly stacked crates. He sees Gertrude, hears Piaf, and "This is the miracle," says nothing, just nods at the horn and mutters, "Better than that bloody polka." Everyone stares. You'd think someone just proposed to a sandbag. Historians still debate whether French music was common among British troops. Some say it was rare, discouraged even. Others argue that records like Piaf's crossed lines all the time, passed between allies like morale-boosting contraband. In your trench, at least there's no doubt. Piaf is queen, and there's a bit of magic in how the song travels. You've seen hardened men, blokes who wouldn't blink at a blown-off toe, get glassy-eyed when her voice kicks in. One soldier, Thomas, actually writes a letter home asking if someone can find more of the French girl with the voice like smoke. Another tries learning the lyrics phonetically, gets halfway through, and gives up when he realizes he's probably singing about cheese. But the weirdest thing? After one playback, Corporal Brenner doesn't just walk away. He sits down, right there on an overturned bucket. Doesn't speak, doesn't blink, just listens. After the song, he stays seated for a minute. Then he pulls something from his jacket, a small, creased photo. A woman, smiling. He folds it back up and leaves. You don't say a word. From then on, no one questions Piaf's place in the lineup. She gets her own sleeve, hand-lettered with FR1, and a tiny heart in the corner. Wilkes draws a crooked rose on the label in pencil. It smudges with damp and fingerprints, but no one dares replace it. Gertrude, meanwhile, begins to wheeze when you crank her too fast. You learn her rhythm again, gentler now, like coaxing breath from an old friend. Your kit's a mess. Your boots are falling apart. But Gertrude still sings, and Piaf still floats above the filth, reminding everyone they're more than just soldiers. You wonder if she knows. Somewhere in Paris, maybe she's recording another track. Maybe she's unaware that her voice is echoing through muddy trenches, wrapped in cold breath and quiet reverence. Or maybe, just maybe, she suspects that her song, fragile and fierce, is holding back despair one scratchy note at a time. The problem with playing music during a war, aside from the obvious entire war part, is that eventually the war plays back. 1 minute you're cranking Gertrude to full volume, Vivaldi spinning out into the cold air like golden thread, and the next, the sky opens up and tries to kill you. It starts with a distant rumble. Your mid-record, something from the Four Seasons, ironically titled Spring, because nothing here is green except for the mold. You've only just settled the stylus into place when the trench trembles, just enough for tea to slosh sideways in its tin. A beat later, you feel it in your bones. That unmistakable shudder in the earth, like a monster rolling over in its sleep. Then boom, the shell lands close. Too close. Everyone ducks instinctively, pressing into the trench wall like it might give them a hug. You shield Gertrude without thinking, arms curled around her like a child hiding a pet from an angry landlord. But here's the insane thing, you don't stop the music. Maybe you should have. Maybe your priorities need work. But the string section's soaring, the melody's climbing, and you think, if I stop this now, they'll remember the explosion. If I let it play, maybe they'll remember the violins instead. Another shell lands, farther this time. The sound stacks in the air like thunder trying to hold its breath. Somehow, miraculously, the music keeps going. No skips, no stutters, just Vivaldi, polite as ever, pretending he's not being upstaged by a 77mm field gun. Boyd peeks over a crate. Is it mad that this almost makes sense? He shouts. You nod. Very mad. A third shell hits just behind the lines. You flinch but don't stop cranking. This is what it means to defy the absurd. To push art into chaos and see if it floats. Historians still argue whether music was ever played during actual barrages. Some accounts claim soldiers were too focused on survival to care. Others insist that music, even poorly timed, could dull the edges of fear. You're living proof that sometimes the cello does go well with catastrophe. After the shelling slows, the trench breathes as one. A collective exhale. No injuries. Just ringing ears and more holes in the walls. Gertrude somehow survived. A few men actually clap. Half joking, half relieved. Encore! Someone laughs. Only to duck as a rat leaps from a sandbag like it's staging a curtain call. You put the record away carefully, checking for cracks. Still intact. A little warped maybe, like everyone here, but playable. That night, around the low flicker of a smuggled candle stub, you get questions. Why Vivaldi? Why not something with more oomph? You shrug. I figured if we're going to die, we might as well go out classy. That gets a laugh. Even Brenner smirks, his first in weeks. Over the next few days, Vivaldi becomes an in-joke. Every time someone trips, stubs a toe, or accidentally insults an officer, someone hums a bar of Spring like it's a punchline. The music becomes part of the story of the trench. The same way you remember that one night it rained frogs, or when Jenkins mistook a dead pigeon for breakfast. You survived that barrage with a string concerto as your shield. And the men don't forget. One afternoon, Wilkes asks if you have anything else classical, maybe something less suicidal. You dig through your collection and find a scratched Chopin nocturne. It's moody, brooding, but it does the trick. Even Boyd admits, this one's got backbone. Later that week, during another long spell of quiet punctuated only by the far-off crump of distant guns, you risk it again. Vivaldi's Summer this time. Just as the music rises, so does the shelling. A few of the lads laugh nervously. One mutters, "He's doing it again." You grin, wind the crank, and play louder. Is it madness? Probably, but there's something poetic about it. The world's gone wrong in every way possible, and you've decided, rationally or not, to soundtrack its absurdity with elegance. You wonder what Vivaldi would think. This delicate composition, once written for candlelit salons and aristocratic ears, now blaring into a mud pit full of lice-bitten men and misplaced bravery. He might faint, or applaud. There's a part of you that hopes someone's writing this down. Not the war, not the orders, not the casualties, but this. A soldier playing a gramophone while shells scream overhead. Feels like a painting, or a joke, or both. At some point, a war reporter passes through. He hears the music, takes notes, doesn't ask questions, just watches. Then, as he leaves, he tips his helmet and says, "You're not right in the head, son." You take it as a compliment. One evening, you try playing something new. A record you've never dared before. It's not famous. Not particularly grand. Just a waltz with a cheerful lilt. It plays gently while the sun sets behind no man's land, painting the mud gold. No one speaks. No one needs to. The waltz finishes. The horn echoes faintly. And for a moment, just one, you could swear the war itself hesitates. Like even the guns are waiting for the next track. You let the silence linger. Not everything needs music. Sometimes, it's the memory of it that saves you. It's the smell you notice first. Not the usual trench cocktail of moldy boots, boiled meat, and that weird, sour dampness that clings to every surface. This is something older, sharper, the kind of smell that whispers, "Don't look over here unless you're ready." But of course you do. They found him tucked behind a collapsed wall in a disused segment of trench. A quiet lad named Miller, barely 20, usually too shy to request a tune but always there when one started playing. He'd been hit in the night. Quick, clean, if that word even means anything here. They didn't find him until breakfast roll call. And what he left behind was a record. Not just any record. A homemade one. You turn it over in your gloved hands, fingertips grazing the fragile edges. The label's been written in pencil for later, smudged by the damp but still legible. There's no artist name, no date. Just that message. A gift from a boy who probably never raised his voice but somehow believed enough to carve his own. No one says anything as you carry it back to the dugout. Gertrude waiting, still propped under canvas like a guest of honor. You wipe her gently, clear the turntable, and slide the record into place. Crank. Drop the stylus. A hiss, a crackle, and then a voice. Hello from the other side of boredom. It's Miller. Nervous. Shaky. Recorded on cheap equipment, probably using one of those primitive home kits they sold in department stores before the war. His voice wavers like a held breath. But it's him. The trench goes still. He sings. It's not polished. He's off-key. The words are rushed, stumbling over a few lines. But he laughs midway through. A sharp, bright, real laugh, and suddenly the entire trench feels like it's watching a ghost do something impossibly human. He finishes with, "Hope this gets a chuckle. Keep your socks dry." That's it. No one chuckles. But someone does wipe their eyes. Historians still debate whether private soldiers made personal records at the front. Most say it's unlikely, too fragile, too impractical. But others argue that early recording kits were available, especially in cities, and soldiers on leave might have tried. You're holding one of those impossible stories right now. You don't play it again right away. You tuck it carefully into a sleeve lined with dry cloth, mark it do not touch, and stash it in your deepest kit pocket, next to your last letter from home and a worn photo of Brighton's pier. Later that week, a few of the lads ask if they can hear it again. Quietly, not in a group, just one-on-one. In the corner of the trench, heads bowed like it's a hymn. You oblige. Each time, the effect is the same. Tears, silence, a slow nod. Jenkins, who rarely speaks about anything beyond rations, says, "That voice, it's like he's still here." He is. You start calling it the ghost track. Soon it becomes a kind of ritual. When someone's transferred or injured or just feels the black fog creeping too close, they ask for the ghost track. And for 2 minutes and 36 seconds, the war recedes. They listen. They remember. They hold on. Boyd makes a joke about how Miller's laugh is offbeat. You don't say anything, but the next day you find he's quietly added a makeshift lock to Gertrude's storage box. Just a string and button, but still a gesture. Wilkes offers you a spare needle, saying you'll need it if you're playing that kind of music. You nod. That kind. The kind that matters, he says, blinking fast. Of all the records you have, Edith, Chopin, Whiteman, the ghost track becomes the most precious. You protect it with a reverence that surprises even you. And then, one morning, a young private named Evans, new to the trench and full of bright questions, asks the impossible. "Could we make more?" First you laugh. Where? With what? A tin can and a wish. But he's serious. And more importantly, he has an idea. Turns out, his father worked in radio back in Liverpool. Evans knows a bit about coils and diaphragms and, most importantly, improvisation. Over the next week, he cobbles together something vaguely recording-ish from spare parts, copper wire, and a piece of helmet liner. Shouldn't work. But then again, neither should a gramophone in a war zone. The first test is terrible. The recording's just static and one very loud sneeze. But by the third attempt, something sticks. It's Boyd. He sings a Scottish ballad, deeply out of tune, forgetting half the lyrics and improvising the rest with something about sheep and someone named Moira. It's hilarious. You play it back. Everyone howls. Even Brenner cracks a grin. A new trend begins. Soldiers start recording short messages, jokes, songs, declarations of love to sweethearts back home, or pub waitresses with vague memories of them. Most recordings fail, but a few stick. You start labeling them. Wilkes _ the one with the cat story. Evans _ ballad possibly illegal. Boyd _ Murrah again. The trench becomes a kind of living jukebox, full of voices past and present. You store the records in a wooden crate labeled Voices. It sits next to Gertrude like a proud parent. Some nights, you just crank the ghostly library and let the lads hear each other in ways they haven't before. Vulnerable. Silly. Real. One soldier says, "This is better than letters." Another replies, "Because it feels like they're still breathing." You agree. And every so often, quietly, you pull out the original. The ghost track. You place it carefully. You drop the stylus. And once again, Miller sings. It begins with a single tin of condensed milk. You didn't even want it. Some Canadian lad with a fox tattoo insisted on swapping it for a crackly Louis Armstrong record. Not a bad deal, considering you're down to powdered tea and a spoon you've half chewed through from nerves. You hand over the record, he hands you the tin like it's a bar of gold. And just like that, the barter begins. The trench becomes a marketplace. Not for weapons, not for secrets, but for sound. You quickly realize that Gertrude, with her dusty stack of grooves and scratches, has created a black market music economy. Soldiers from other units start showing up with strange offers. One bloke offers 3 cigars for a comedy sketch. Another wants a single Charleston tune in exchange for a clean towel, which, by trench standards, is the equivalent of a Rolex. And what do? You become the merchant of melodies. The gramophone king. Part soldier, part disc jockey, part dealer of joy. Every deal is a negotiation. Give me the Sousa March and I'll throw in half a bar of soap. Got a German tango, contraband stuff. Swap you for any kind of brass band. I'll do anything, for more payoff. It's harmless at first. Then things get weird. One night, a French soldier slides into your trench like a ghost. No introduction. Just points at Gertrude, then at your stack of records, then holds out a wrapped package. Inside, a German waltz. That's right, German. The irony is thick enough to spread on toast. You're not even sure where he got it. Stolen, smuggled, found in the mud? You don't ask. You just nod, tuck it into your coat, and play it 2 nights later when the wind dies down. The reaction is complicated. Some men sneer. Others go quiet. Boyd, of all people, says, "They may be the enemy, but this is bloody haunting." Because it is. The waltz is delicate, lilting, impossibly sad. It wins its way through the trench like cigarette smoke. By the end, even the hard-nosed lads are staring into the dark like they're waiting for someone to come back. Historians still argue whether enemy music ever made it into Allied trenches. Some say it was suppressed, considered demoralizing. But others claim that in the chaos of war, music flowed as freely as rumors, and often across both sides of no man's land. You've seen it now with your own eyes. Soon, you're trading with anyone who has ears. French troops bring café songs, accordion-heavy and filled with longing. Canadians swap tinny country ballads sung by voices barely older than your own. Australians offer strange bush ditties you can't quite translate but appreciate for the sheer volume alone. One Belgian soldier hands you a record wrapped in linen and says, "Play this when no one else is awake." It's a lullaby, soft, fragile, possibly older than the war itself. You cry the first time you play it. Not big, messy tears. Just a quiet leak down your cheek while staring at a rat that's politely paused its scurry to listen, too. Your record collection becomes legendary. Your trench transforms from battlefield to borderline nightclub. They start calling it Club Durant. You hang a sock on a stick as a fake sign. Someone scrawls "open for requests" in chalk above the latrine. Boyd insists on being bouncer, though he refuses to check names unless bribed with tea. And then comes the bootleg era. Evans, ever the tinkerer, figures out how to record new tracks. Not just voices, but actual music. Live fiddle from a scrawny lad named Turner, who plays with his eyes shut and tongue sticking out, and even a duet by Wilkes and Jenkins, who can't sing but harmonize like drunken angels. Suddenly, you're not just playing records. You're making them. The black market explodes. Everyone wants exclusives. "What VE you got that no one else does?" becomes the new greeting. You start naming them like prized war horses. The latrine ballad, recorded during a thunderstorm, complete with ambient groaning. Trench love song number 4, entirely improvised, possibly about an actual goat. Brenner's Requiem, a dirge recorded the one day the corporal sneezed during a pee-off track and stormed off in shame. Things escalate. Someone sneaks in a record from an American jazz club. It's loud, fast, pure brass chaos. You play it during a particularly boring sentry shift, and 4 men immediately try to invent a new kind of dance that involves slipping repeatedly in the mud. Another soldier gifts you a bootleg labeled only "not for Brenner." You don't play it for weeks. When you finally do, it turns out to be an early vaudeville act featuring what can only be described as risque chicken impressions. It becomes an instant hit. Even Brenner pretends not to laugh. One day you get bold, too bold maybe. You splice together parts of several recordings. Using a scalpel and a risky bit of wax melt Evans swears probably won't damage the stylus. The result is an absolute mess of jazz, lullaby, march, and German waltz. It makes no sense. But the lads love it. They cheer. They dance. Someone throws a sock into the air like it's a party hat. For 10 minutes, the war vanishes. The trench becomes a dance hall, a safe house, a sanctuary made of scratches and brass. And that's when you realize, this black market of music, this underground trench radio station you've built, it's more than entertainment. It's resistance. Against the stink. Against the cold. Against the soul-wearing grind of waiting to die. Every scratchy tune passed hand to hand is a little act of rebellion. A whispered no to the machine. So you keep trading. You keep playing. You keep cranking. And every time Gertrude's horn sings, Whether it's Piaf, Armstrong, or Jenkins doing his haunted owl impression, the trench forgets it's a grave waiting to happen, just for a while. The thing about trench life is that everything smells like wet despair and boiled cabbage, but every so often, something magical worms its way through the muck, and tonight, that something is a dance. You didn't plan it. No one planned it. It starts with Turner, the wiry fiddler with the world's worst haircut and a habit of playing his instrument like he's arguing with it. He's tuning up next to Gertrude, warming his fingers with little flourishes. You're mid-crank, cueing up a swing tune from that American bootleg. A track so scratchy it sounds like it's being sung by a cat under a rug. And then Wilkes, always the showman, jumps to his feet and declares, "Right, lads, it's Saturday night and I am done being single." Everyone laughs. No one stops him. He grabs Jenkins by the elbows, who sputters in confusion and curses until he's spun around. They stumble, knock over a tea tin, and fall into a sort of waltz that looks more like two scarecrows fighting over a sock. But it catches on. Boyd kicks off his boots and slides across a wooden plank like he's skating on whiskey. Even Evans, who normally keeps his limbs close to his body like borrowed furniture, starts tapping his heels and doing what might be a jig or might be an act of self-defense. You wind Gertrude harder, the music crackling out into the night like she's yelling over the war itself. And then someone, no one remembers who, hangs a lantern from a rifle stuck in the sandbags. The flame wobbles but stays lit, casting a soft yellow glow over the makeshift dance floor. Just like that, the dugout becomes a ballroom. Historians still argue whether full-blown trench parties ever happened. Official records don't mention moonlit dances or lantern-lit revelry. But letters, those secret little truths sent home in shaky handwriting, speak of laughter, of music, of nights when men danced with ghosts to forget the war for an hour. You're living one of those nights now. The floor is mud. The walls are sandbags. And yet it feels grand. You spin another record, something faster this time, all horns and bounce. And now the whole trench is moving. Not gracefully, not in time, but joyfully. You catch a glimpse of Corporal Brenner, arms folded, standing just at the edge of the flickering light. Watching, you expect a barked order. Maybe a boot aimed at your gramophone. But he just snorts, mutters, "Bloody fools," and walks off. You'll take it. The dance morphs into a kind of circus. Someone juggles empty tins. Jenkins tries a handstand and nearly breaks his nose. Boyd puts a sock on his head and declares himself the Duchess of Derbyshire. Applause erupts. Someone throws a biscuit. This chaos is perfect. For the first time in what feels like centuries, there's real, unfiltered joy. Not forced morale. Not strained laughter in the face of a shell. Real happiness. And Gertrude, sweet, wheezing Gertrude, holds court like a queen. You switch tracks to something slow and schmaltzy. The energy shifts. Lads pair off. There's swaying, shoulder-clutching. A few twirls that end in near disaster. You even spot Brenner again, further down the line, lit by a flicker of lamplight, tapping one boot in time. You smile. You don't call him out. The song winds down. The final note warbles off-key. Gertrude's crank giving a theatrical death rattle, and the trench exhales. You expect everyone to scatter. Instead, they stay. A quiet settles, heavy but warm. Someone lights a cigarette. Another passes around tea brewed so strong it might qualify as a war crime. You sit beside your gramophone, hand resting on the lid like it's a tired dog. And then, from the shadows, a voice says, "That was the best bleeding night of my life." You turn. It's Wilkes, sweat-soaked, one sock missing, eyes shining. You nod. "It was, wasn't it? I'm not even mad about the jam I stepped in," he says, collapsing beside you. Later, you find a note scratched into the back wall of the dugout, next to old graffiti and the tally of days survived. "Tonight, we danced. W. You leave it there, because that's the thing no one tells you about war. Yes, it's mud and horror and rats bigger than democracy. But sometimes, it's a swing tune under a lantern and the sight of Jenkins trying to tango in his socks. The next morning, things return to normal. Rain. A shell or two in the distance. The stink of whatever's died in the far corner. But everyone walks a little taller. Jokes come faster. Boots land lighter. Even Brenner grumbles with less conviction. You crank Gertrude and play something simple, a lullaby maybe. Nothing dramatic. Just soft enough to say, we're still here. Later, someone from another trench asks, "Heard you lot had a ball last night. Any chance of an encore?" You tell them, "Only if you bring the biscuits this time." And so begins the legend of the dugout dance. It spreads. By the following week, you're hosting them semi-regularly. Invitations are passed via mess tins and rumor. Someone even builds a tiny dance floor out of salvaged planks. It's unstable, uneven, but it holds. Just like you. The day they try to ban the gramophone, it starts with a memo. Not a dramatic order shouted from horseback or some grim-faced officer kicking mud into Gertrude's horn. No. It's a crisp, typed directive that arrives folded in a weatherproof envelope and smells faintly of lavender, which somehow makes it worse. Effective immediately, the use of non-military audio devices in the trenches is prohibited. Morale should be maintained through regulated drills and appropriate discipline. Regulated what now? You read it 3 times. Then again, just to be sure it really does mean what you think it means. They're banning the music. Gertrude, your war-weary gramophone who has survived shelling, damp, dances, and Boyd's improvised bagpipe impressions, is now considered a threat to morale. Takes all of 5 minutes for the news to ripple through the trench. Whispers at first, then groans, then a full-blown, muttered riot with Wilkes storming up and down the duckboards shouting, "This is the hill I'll die on," or at least pull a muscle. Boyd tries to eat the memo. You stop him. Barely. Brenner posts the directive on the message board, stone-faced as ever. But even he reads it with a frown like someone just told him tea was being discontinued. You consider complying. Briefly. Then Jenkins, without looking up from his tin of mystery stew, says, "You gonna let them take our music too?" And that's when the polite mutiny begins. No shouting. No torches and pitchforks. Just quiet rebellion with a swing soundtrack. That night, you crank Gertrude as usual. Only this time, you point the horn down into the earth, muffle it under your coat, and play the softest track you have. One of those haunting little piano numbers that drifts like breath. You look up. The trench is still, listening, and no one snitches. Historians still argue whether there was ever an actual ban on gramophones during the war. Some say restrictions were placed to keep soldiers alert. Others insist that high command didn't care as long as the men stayed quiet and didn't dance too loudly. You know the truth, whatever the rulebook said. The music stayed. The next day, someone disguises Gertrude with a canvas cover and a stenciled-on medical supplies label. Technically not untrue. She heals heads, after all. You hide your record sleeves in a biscuit tin marked razor blades. No one ever opens that one twice. And then Evans, ever the schemer, rewires a tiny headphone contraption. Basically 2 tin funnels with tubing, so you can listen to music privately. It works. Barely. You look like a confused elephant, but at least you're an entertained one. Wilkes starts spreading rumors that Gertrude has been decommissioned. The old girl has fallen in action, he says solemnly. A victim of sonic bravery. It's very convincing until someone hears a ragtime tune seeping from the dugout floorboards. You're caught, sort of. The next inspection rolls through, led by a stiff-lipped major who looks like he's never smiled and wouldn't recognize a joke if it saluted him. He's halfway through asking about rations when he hears something. Faint, delicate, piaf. He stops, cocks his head. The horn is buried, the record hidden, but still. Her voice lingers in the cold air like perfume after someone's left the room. "What was that?" he barks. Brenner, to everyone's shock, steps in. "Rat, sir," he says smoothly. "Rat?" The major replies. "Big one. Died singing." The major frowns, pauses, then walks on. After that, the rebellion escalates beautifully. Evans sets up a hidden switch that lets you play records behind a false panel in the trench wall. Boyd paints "Keep Out, Bad Smell" across it, which works better than any lock. You hold concerts during cover of darkness. timed precisely with scheduled artillery booms so no one outside hears the melody. It's a masterpiece of silent anarchy. And then comes the piece de resistance. Someone, still a mystery, sends a new record. No return address, no label. You play it one evening and there it is. In the Mood by Glenn Miller. Yes, that Glenn Miller. It's brand new, practically futuristic compared to your usual collection. The brass hits like caffeine. The rhythm swings so hard Wilkes almost dislocates a shoulder trying to Charleston. Even Boyd smiles. You play it 5 times in a row. Then once more just for Gertrude. The trench is alive again. That night you write a letter to your sister. We're not supposed to be listening to music anymore. So we've decided to listen harder. Morale climbs. Food still tastes like warm sadness, but the smiles last longer. Letters home include lines like, had a secret concert, and danced like no one was watching, because no one's allowed to. This peaceful chaos. Until the directive is updated. The major returns, flanked by 2 silent lieutenants and an aura of disapproval thick enough to clog your sinuses. You're ignoring the order, he says flatly. You don't deny it. You point to your comrades, heads high, boots muddy, hearts still full of last night's tune. Then Wilkes steps forward. He salutes and begins to whistle. In the Mood. Loud, defiant, pitchy. One by one, the others join in. Boyd hums the trumpet line. Jenkins taps the beat with his spoon. Even Evans leans in with a tuneless harmony that somehow makes it better. The major listens, frowns, then says, just keep it down, and walks away. You wind Gertrude slowly, smiling. The music plays. Long live the polite rebellion. You never expect the post to deliver anything you actually want. Normally, it's a soggy letter, a tin of jam that somehow leaks before it's opened, or a newspaper so outdated it's still reporting optimism. But today is different. You're halfway through a miserable inventory check, 5 bayonets, 2 rats, and a bar of soap so dry it might be a fossil. When Evans runs up, grinning like he's just won a holiday. Parcel for you, Durant, he says, panting. From your sister. You freeze. Not because she's forgotten you exist. She writes regularly, always cheerful, always too eager to pretend things are fine. But because this box smells like home. It's tied with string, wrapped in brown paper, corners worn from its journey through what must have been half of France and at least one trench cat's mouth. You rip it open. Inside, glory of glories, is a stack of records, wrapped in layers of crinkled paper, each labeled in her tidy script. For rainy days, when Jenkins starts moaning again. Not safe for Brenner. Play this when you need to cry. And at the bottom, wedged between 2 sleeves of biscuits so stale they may outlast civilization, is a letter. Dear Georgie, I raided every shop in Brighton for these. Even talked the local vicar into letting me borrow one from the parish collection. Don't worry, I'll sneak it back later. Mum says to tell you she still sings when she does the washing. Dad pretends he doesn't listen, but I caught him tapping his foot. Stay safe. Keep spinning. Love, Ellie. You read it twice, then a 3rd time, then tuck it into your coat like it's a part of you. And then you look at the top record. The label's smudged, faded ink, but the groove's deep and clean. You wind Gertrude, drop the stylus. A voice rises. It's comedy, a music hall sketch from years ago. 2 men arguing about a chicken, delivered in accents so exaggerated you could chew on them. The trench erupts. Laughter explodes like a happy grenade. Jenkins snorts tea through his nose. Boyd nearly chokes on a biscuit. You play it again, and again, then the next one. A sweeping orchestral waltz, smooth as satin and twice as luxurious. No one dances. They just sit and let the sound pour over them like a warm bath after weeks of cold stew. But then comes that record. The one marked, play this when you need to cry. You hesitate. It's a ballad. Slow. Pure voice and piano. A woman singing about a place that doesn't exist. Where there's no war, no goodbyes, no mud. Just light. Just laughter. And it wrecks you. You sit there, still as a statue, watching the horn shudder softly as the voice cracks on the last note. Jenkins looks down. Wilkes wipes his nose like he's got trench flu. Even Evans, usually so chipper, chews his lip until it bleeds. No one says anything. You just let the silence hold you all for a while. Historians still debate the psychological effects of music during wartime. Some claim it offered momentary distraction. Others argue it tapped into something deeper, an emotional anchor to the world that existed before the shooting started. You know which side you believe now. The record becomes part of a new ritual. You play it for birthdays, for bad days, for the worst days, like the day you lose Turner. It happens during a routine patrol that goes sideways. A sniper, no time to duck. One moment he's there, fingers twitching like they're itching to play, and the next, he's folded on the ground like an empty uniform. You don't say anything. That night, the trench is silent. No jokes, no soup complaints, just eyes staring into nothing. You place the record on the turntable, crank slowly, set the needle, and let her sing. It's different this time. Every note feels personal. The voice trembles like it knows Turner's gone, like it's saying goodbye. Afterward, you find a folded paper tucked under Turner's bedroll. It's a song, unfinished, scribbled lyrics and little music notes drawn with shaky hands. You add it to the box, the growing archive of what was and who we were, and Gertrude keeps going. You play every record your sister sent, even the strange one from the vicar. It's a hymn, solemn and echoing, and it actually hushes the trench like a sermon. Jenkins mumbles something about ghosts. Boyd mutters about blasphemy. But no one moves until the final note dies. Eventually, the laughter returns. So do the dances, the trades, the late-night requests whispered like prayers. But that one record, the crying one, never goes back to the main stack. Stays tucked away, wrapped in cloth, kept close for when it's really needed. And the letter from your sister? You reread it so often the folds begin to fray. You write back, Ellie, every record is a treasure. One made me laugh until I dropped my tea in a rat hole. Another made me cry so hard Wilkes offered me his sock as a tissue. You've done more good out here than you'll ever know. Keep stealing from the vicar. Love, G. You sign it with a shaky smile, the ink blurring slightly where the tears fell. Gertrude, of course, is already spinning the next track, because she always knows what's needed next. Starts as a rumor. Whispers passed between trenches like cigarettes and bad jokes. A lookout says he heard humming. A sniper claims he saw movement. Not troops, not flares, just shadows. Dancing? Someone swears they heard a piano coming from across no man's land. You chalk it up to trench madness. The mind invents anything to distract from the rot between your toes and the ache in your back. Still, you're curious. So you try something. It's early evening. The air's still, like the front is holding its breath again. You pick one of the softer records, something with a slow swing, easy on the ears. You set Gertrude on a mound near the parapet, point the horn toward the wire, and crank. The sound's quiet, but it carries. Jazz floats into no man's land. Not long after, Wilkes nudges your arm. There, he says. You squint through the haze. Across the field, beyond the broken trees and barbed mess, a shape appears. A helmet, barely visible. Then another. No weapons. No movement. Just watching. Then a sound. Not gunfire. Not shouting. Clapping. Slow. Tentative. And then a whistle. A melody. You freeze. The notes are German. You recognize the tune. A waltz. You have that record. You play it the next night. Nothing happens. But the third night you hear it again. Clearer. From their side. Someone's got a horn. Proper speaker. Not a gramophone, something bigger. They're playing your waltz back to you. Historians still argue whether music was ever exchanged across enemy lines in World War I. The Christmas truce of 1914 is often cited, but anything later was officially discouraged, even forbidden. Yet stories persist. Fragments in letters and half-buried memoirs of moments like this. Shared humanity in defiance of every order. You're in one now. It becomes a ritual. You play something. They play something. A call and response across the void. Jazz for jazz. Lullaby for lullaby. One night, they even play the ghost track. Your blood runs cold. Did they get a copy? Did someone carry it across the wire? Or are they just echoing your grief? Whatever the answer, it's peaceful. For 5-10 minutes each evening, there's no war. Just songs skipping over death. Boyd listens with his eyes closed. If we ever get home, he says, remind me not to hate anyone with good taste in music. Even Brenner comes out to listen once. Doesn't speak. Just stares at the wire, face unreadable. Then one night it changes. You play a French cafe tune. A cheeky little accordion piece that normally gets a smile or two. The other side doesn't reply. You wait. Nothing. Then a shell. No warning. No glimmer of respect. Just thunder from their side. Screaming overhead. You duck. Everyone ducks. The record skips. Needle flying. Gertrude tips sideways. You scramble to catch her, cradling her like a wounded pet. The moment passes. No hits. No injuries. But the spell is broken. Afterward, silence. Days pass. You try again. A cautious ballad, played quietly, almost apologetically. Nothing comes back. Someone says the Germans must have changed shifts. Maybe the musical ones got transferred. Or worse, the trench feels colder now. Jenkins suggests a ceasefire anthem, something noble, solemn. Boyd argues for defiance. Play jazz again, loud. Make M remember. You split the difference. One night you play a jazz requiem. Slow, sad, but proud. Still no reply. Until the 6th night. Then, from across the wire, a single note. Then another. Not a record. A harmonica. It's faint, wobbly, but unmistakably alive. A German soldier, alone or brave or mad, playing a solo just for you. You sit with Gertrude in your lap and let it wash over you. And when it ends, you crank her up and send back something simple. A lullaby. The one your sister marked for rainy days. No more shells come that week. No more waltzes either. Just silence. But it's gentle silence now. The kind you can sit inside without flinching. You write it all down in your notebook. There's a man on the other side who knows the same songs I do. I'd like to think we'd have shared a pint if we'd met in a cafe instead of a trench. I hope he lives. I hope he plays again. A week later, you receive an anonymous record in a battered sleeve, tucked among supplies. German press. Piano and harmonica duet. The label? For mein Bruder im Schlamm. For my brother in the mud. You cry. Of course you cry. Then you crank Gertrude. And let him play. It happens just after dawn. When the light's pale and sharp and the world still smells like yesterday's gunpowder and half-cooked oats. You're winding Gertrude for the morning track. Something soft, something cheerful. When the ground buckles beneath you like it just gave up pretending to be solid. A whistle screams overhead. And before you can say, not now, we're in the middle of track 3. The world explodes. You hit the dirt hard. The sound cracks open the sky. The kind that fills your chest and presses on your ears from the inside. You hear someone shout. Someone else coughs. Then the smoke rolls in like an angry fog, thick and mean. When you finally blink the grit from your eyes, you see it. Gertrude's on her side. Her lid's blown clean off. The crank lies twisted in the mud, barely recognizable. One record, Chopin, you think is shattered like ice. A shard still spins on the turntable, as if unsure the concert is really over. And just like that, she's gone. It doesn't hit you at first. Not properly. There are bigger things to worry about. Jenkins is clutching his arm, Wilkes has blood on his collar, and Boyd is limping like a duck with a vendetta. You move. You do what needs doing. But later, when the dust settles, you kneel beside what's left of her. She's cracked down the side. Her horns crumpled. The stylus is snapped. You pick it all up piece by piece, cradling her guts like she's a fallen friend. Which, let's be honest, she is. Evans crouches beside you. We'll fix her, he says, voice low. You nod, but you don't believe it. Not yet. Jenkins pulls a biscuit tin from the rubble and opens it. Inside are half the records you'd stashed the night before. They survived. Somehow. He hands them to you like a soldier returning medals. One of them is the ghost track. Still safe, still whole. You feel something twist in your chest. Historians still debate whether soldiers truly formed emotional attachments to personal items. Some argue it was survival instinct, a way to feel in control. Others suggest deeper meaning, how one object could represent everything that mattered before war. A book, a photo, a scarf, a gramophone. For you, it's not up for debate. Gertrude was your rebellion, your refuge, your only connection to music, memory, and meaning in a place designed to strip all three away. And now she's broken. You carry her remains into the dugout that night, wrapped in your coat. No one mocks you. Even Brenner watches in silence as you set her carefully on the crate, piece by shattered piece. Boyd says, "Should have made her a helmet." You almost laugh. Almost. Evans, who once reassembled a broken lantern using buttons and glue, lays out the parts and begins taking inventory. He turns the crankshaft slowly, winces. "Bent bad," he mutters. Then the tone arm. "Might be salvageable. The horn? We'll need wire. And a miracle." You sit across from him, watching like a mourner at a wake. The rest of the trench goes about its evening routine. Subdued. No music tonight. Just the occasional clank of a pot or the soft swish of cloth on wood as someone patches their uniform. You reach into your coat pocket and pull out your sister's letter. You've read it so many times the creases form a kind of braille. Her words seem fainter now, like the ink is grieving too. "Keep spinning," she'd said. "You're trying." You lie awake that night with your head resting near the crate, as if Gertrude might breathe in her sleep. The wind howls outside, and you imagine it's the echo of her horn. In the morning, you wake to the sound of gentle cursing. Evans is already working. Jenkins hands him a spoon. Wilkes offers part of a harmonica reed for the new stylus. It becomes a team effort. The great Gertrude restoration. Someone finds wire. Boyd sacrifices a piece of his kit bag. Brenner donates a length of twine without a word and then pretends it never happened. For a week, it becomes the trench project. A way to keep busy, keep moving, keep sane. And then, on a gray Tuesday afternoon, with the scent of wet boots and strong tea in the air, Evans looks up. She's ready. You don't breathe. He sets the rebuilt horn into place. It wobbles, but it stands. The crank, still bent, has been replaced with part of a wrench. The stylus is crude, taped, glued, prayed over, but it holds. You choose a record. Not the ghost track. Not yet. You pick something cheerful. Whiteman's jazz. Familiar. Fast. You wind. You drop the stylus. The first few notes are wobbly, muffled, but then clarity. Gertrude sings. The trench bursts into applause. Boyd throws a sock in the air. Jenkins salutes the horn. Evans grins like he's just been knighted. And you? You sit back, close your eyes, and let the music wrap around your heart like bandages. She's not perfect. She wheezes on the high notes. Her timing's a bit off. But she's back. Wounded. Patched. Still standing. Like you. You'd think, after nearly losing her, you'd play it safe. Stick to daytime concerts. Keep volumes low. Maybe even ration the records like Jam on Hardtack, Precious, Sparing. But that's not how you roll. Because the moment Gertrude finds her voice again, you know exactly what needs to happen next. You crank her up, literally and figuratively, and plan something completely stupid. A trench concert. Full length. No muffling. No coats over the horn. Just music. Loud and defiant and joyful. Pushed right into the face of war like a pie hurled at a general. You don't even wait for permission. You do, however, pick your moment carefully. A supply officer tipped you off that a war reporter is making rounds. A bigwig type with a notepad, a scarf too clean to be trusted, and the kind of pen that smells like it costs more than your boots. Perfect. The day arrives, damp and blustery. The trench is freshly patched, the puddles mostly scooped into ditches, and morale, well, it's twitching between cautious and caffeine high. Boyd suggests a curtain. You use a blanket. Wilkes draws a fake program and hands it out like you're at the Royal Albert Hall. Club Durant. One night only. Starring Gertrude the Unbreakable. featuring the Soggy Socks Swing Ensemble. You open with something brassy, loud, attention-grabbing, American jazz with an almost obnoxious sense of optimism. Soldiers from neighboring trenches poke their heads over, squinting through binoculars, probably wondering if they've inhaled too many trench fumes. The reporter arrives just as the second record spins up. He looks baffled, maybe even annoyed. He adjusts his scarf, scribbles something, then walks right up to you mid-crank. "You're the Gramophone chap?" You nod. He raises an eyebrow. "Not regulation." You grin. "Neither's surviving in this mud hole. But here we are." He doesn't smile. Not then. But he doesn't walk away either. Instead, he sits, notebook open, listening. You run through your greatest hits. Jazz, Piaf, the waltz, even that weird vaudeville sketch Wilkes always quotes badly. Jenkins taps a beat with a spoon. Evans mimes conducting with a bayonet. Boyd pretends to ballroom dance with a rifle. It's ludicrous. It's brilliant. By the fourth track, the reporter stops writing. He's just listening. You watch him, see something loosen in his face. Maybe a thread of understanding tugging at the knot behind his stiff jaw. Then you hit him with the big one. You pull out the record, the ghost track. The reporter watches you swap it in. "Is this a classic?" he asks. "No," you say. "This is a friend." The record spins. The voice begins. And just like that, everything changes. The trench falls into a hush. The melody floats, shaky but brave, filling the cold air with memory. The reporter leans forward, head tilted, frown melted away. When it ends, no one claps. They just sit in it, in the weight of it. The reporter finally speaks. "Who was he?" You answer, quiet. "Miller. He left this behind." He writes that down. Later, he asks for a name. You give him the list, Turner. Miller. All the boys who sang, who danced, who made Gertrude sing in the dark. He doesn't ask for your name. You give it anyway. 2 weeks later, a letter arrives. Official stationery. Fancy crest. No return address. Inside is a clipping. "In the trenches. Music Against Madness." By A. Wainwright, special correspondent. He writes about you, about Gertrude, about the power of one soldier's foolish, wonderful idea to fight despair with a needle and crank. You read it 3 times, then pass it around. Boyd rolls his eyes. "Should have mentioned my kazoo solo." Jenkins says, "Think he'll send us more records?" But beneath the jokes, there's pride. Quiet, shared pride. You pin the article to the trench wall with a bent nail. Every time someone walks by, they tap it like it's a good luck charm. And then, just when the music seems safe again, it happens. A new order. Real this time. Not lavender-scented. Not quietly ignored. All non-military items to be packed and sent back, including unauthorized entertainment equipment. You're supposed to crate Gertrude, ship her home, and suddenly it's really over. You try to obey. Truly. You clean her up, polish her horn, wipe every inch of her cracked lid. You wrap her in cloth like she's porcelain. You set her in the crate, and you stare at the lid for a full hour, unable to close it. Because you know, if she leaves, something else goes with her. Not just music, not just memory, hope. You don't sleep that night. At dawn, you make your choice. You pull her from the crate, and instead of shipping her out, you play her, loud. No hiding, no excuses, just one last song. The trench joins in, not with instruments, not with words, but with presence. They sit, they sway, some hum. Even Brenner doesn't stop you. He just stands there, arms crossed, lips tight, maybe even grateful. You don't care if it's the last song she ever plays, because it's the one that says everything you can't. That you're tired, that you're scared, that you're still here, and somehow still human. You know it's the last time before you even wind the crank. Gertrude creaks like an old gate. Her horn's still dented. Her stylus barely holds, and there's a tremble in her spin that wasn't there a week ago. But she's willing, brave even. You can almost feel her pushing through one revolution at a time. The trench is unusually quiet. Not shell quiet. Not watchful or tense. reverent. Everyone knows what's coming. You've saved a record. One that's never been played out here. You don't know why, not until now. It's slow, simple, an old melody from home, the kind that played on Sundays in the village square when kids ran barefoot and no one had ever heard the word shrapnel. You set it on the turntable. Your hands are steady. You crank, and it begins. The last song. The music rises like breath after weeping. It floats through the trench like a story someone's trying to remember. The horn warbles. The stylus ticks with effort. But the song is whole. And it's beautiful. Even the wind hushes for it. You think about everything it's carried, every tune, every voice, every memory carved into wax and spun through mud and madness. This isn't just Gertrude's farewell. It's yours too, because tomorrow you go over the top. It's written in ink on the orders nailed to the support post. 0500. Advance. Take the ridge. You've seen men go over before. You've seen what's left behind. Boots facing the wrong way. Helmets with no heads. Letters with no readers. And now it's your turn. You watch your mates. Wilkes trying to sit still, knees jittering like drumsticks. Evans staring down at the ground, lips moving, either praying or doing math. Jenkins clutching a pencil and a half-written letter. He'll finish it after, he says. You both know he won't. Boyd meets your eye, nods once. No jokes. Even Brenner lingers. He says nothing, just listens, jaw tight. You let the record play all the way through. No one moves. No one speaks. When it ends, there's a kind of holy silence. Then, as if on cue, someone starts humming. Softly. Then another voice joins. Then another. Until the whole trench, every last mud-soaked, sleep-deprived soul is singing. No words. Just the melody. You feel it in your chest. In your bones. In your teeth. Like the war can't touch you. Not for this minute. And then it's over. You lift the stylus. The record spins in silence. Gertrude shudders once. And stops. No smoke. No explosion. Just a final, graceful exhale. She's done. You rest a hand on her lid and whisper, "Good girl." Historians may never write this down. There will be no medals. No photos. Just the memory, clutched quietly by those who were there. And maybe, years from now, someone will try to tell the story. About a trench. A gramophone. A soldier with more guts than sense. Maybe they won't believe it. Doesn't matter. You were here. The next morning is cold. Damp. Birds don't sing out here anymore. You stand with your mates. Breath steaming in the gray. Wilkes cracks his knuckles. Evans won't stop tapping his helmet. You carry nothing but your kit and one record in your breast pocket. The one your sister marked, "Play this when you need to cry." Not for playing now. Just for remembering. The whistle blows. You climb. And the last thing you hear, before the noise, before the fury, before the world tears itself open again, is a song, not from the horn or a record, but from inside you, and it carries you forward. 300-word wind down. The trench fades. The voices drift away. And the music softens, becoming just a thread of melody in your mind. Delicate, distant, almost like it was never really there. You can still feel the shape of the gramophone in your hands, the rhythm of the crank, the warmth of the record spinning even in the coldest nights. Each note, each song, a little act of courage. A lullaby to hold back fear. A joke to hold back tears. A heartbeat when yours felt like it might stop. And now, in the hush of night, you can rest. You remember the smell of old records, the creak of the trench boards, the way a waltz could make boots move even when spirits didn't want to. You remember your friends, how they laughed, how they hummed, how they dared to dance in the dirt. Most of all, you remember the music. Not because it was perfect, but because it was yours. And maybe, just maybe, the war didn't win all the way. Because somewhere in the sound, in the memory, in the fragile beauty of that final song, you carried something impossible. You carried joy, you carried hope, and you shared it. So now, let that last note echo quietly as you breathe slower. Let it lull you away from the guns and the grime, back into softness, back into stillness. Sleep easy now. The gramophone is quiet. But the music never really stops.